Article written on VPIRG's website, tons of excess pollutants and metals would come out of burning tires, including one of the most dangerous chemicals, dioxin.
Well, the particular pollutants they're talking about, like mercury and the dioxin and others, these are impurities. And you might ask, well, why is there mercury in automobile tires?
Yeah.
And the reason is that automobile tires are made out of petroleum and they're made out of crude oil. When crude oil comes out of the ground, it's got trace elements, chromium, mercury, heavy metals they call it. And those are invariably toxic. So when they're in the tire, well, they just stay there until you've used the tire up.
Once you burn
But once you burn it, that puts all that stuff in the air.
Yeah.
And it was never in that, when the petroleum was underground, it was segregated from the living material on the faces of the earth. But when you pump it out of the ground, then you're responsible for making sure that the small amount of harmful stuff, the poison in it, doesn't get released to where people can breathe it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways to do that. You just have to have the right kind of treatment system to eliminate this waste.
In 1985, the EPA recognized dioxin to be one of the most potent human-made carcinogens known.
Yeah, that's a chemical compound that appears in incinerators when you burn compounds that have some carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and chlorine mixed together. So it's not an intentional thing, but it just happens when you have very hot gases with those components. And it's a very toxic substance and presumed to be a cancer-causing agent.
Our next stop on our tour was to the control center for the levels of pulp in the storage containers. They showed us the paper that came out of the cleaning process and said that someone would show us the process of cleaning and bleaching the paper.
If I pull up the digester, you see what that's doing. See, as you saw, it's dark brown. That's before it's bleached. As it goes down through, it gets whiter.
Yep.
This is probably about 35 brightness. This here is probably a little bit more.
Yep.
This one here is a 90 brightness.
It's like printing paper and...
Right. And stuff you put in your mouth when you're in school and chew. Well, this is that.
Yep.
Only it's pressed.
Yep.
When it presses thing, if you want to go, you don't care if they take that, do you, Donna?
No, that's okay.
You can have that.
The right side is the brown side.
Yep.
And Kevin's going to pull a sample of brown side pulp just as it comes out of the digester. You'll see what it looks like.
It's real
dark and dirty and so forth. And then we'll pull a couple samples going down the bleach side so you can see what that process is. We'll open up one of the ports so you can look in and see it. They're like gigantic washing machines, but and probably when he opens those up, you can try to get some video, but it's going to fog quickly because it's warm and humid.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay.
First stage of the bleach plant. They've added bleach. Notice how it's a little lighter in color.
Most of the pollution that comes from the Tichonderoga mill comes from this process, the process of bleaching and adding chemicals to the paper to make it whiter.
pump it up to the storage tanks.
How do you deal with a problem that involves like another state? How do you deal with that being in New York?
This is one of the most interesting parts of this, because we have federal air quality laws, but those laws are advanced or implemented by the states. So your question is one that we continue to debate sort of informally, is, you know, how do we deal with the air blowing from west to east? How do we deal with something that's upwind of us when the agency that regulates it doesn't really have the interests of the people on whom the pollution will fall? Right. And we've seen this in the Midwest power plant litigation, and I think we're just seeing it here on a smaller scale.
Just recently, New York Senator Hillary Clinton wrote a letter to New York environmental officials stating that she thought it would be a good idea for the international paper to burn tires at their Tichonderoga mill. Soon after, the headlines of the Burlington Free Press read, "Governor Douglas slams Clinton on tire burn." Governor Douglas has been one of the many people fighting for Vermont's air quality.
We don't anticipate any impact on the lake. These are air emissions, and air emissions carry far over Lake Champlain because of the height of our stacks.
Yep.
Of course it'll blow away. That's why we're breathing it. People who live downwind. And there's no question that the long-term objective of the federal and state programs to regulate pollution is to lower the emissions so the concentrations in the air that we breathe will be lowered and there'll be less damage. If you have a tall stack like that that puts out a large amount of emissions, it just means that these pollutants will be spread over a much larger area at an unhealthful level, and so a much larger number of people will be affected. So that's no excuse, it seems to me, for burning harmful materials to say, well, we're just going to poop it out into the air and it'll blow over your head, because somewhere further downwind it comes back to down to earth level, and then there are a much larger number of people who will be exposed to it. So they've got their signs backwards.
As we continued on our tour, Donna explained to us that they were having a slight problem with the leak, and that we shouldn't worry because it was only water. We visited the generator control center and the generator room. This generator gives the Tichonderoga paper mill enough energy to run the plant 24 hours a day.
We generate enough power here every day to power our entire process, but we are connected to the Niagara Mohawk grid, and so sometimes we buy some power from the grid when it's cheaper, and sometimes we sell some power when we can make some money selling power to the grid. This power plant produces enough energy every day to power a small city like Rutland or Plattsburgh or something. It's a very power-intensive process to make paper.